Welcome everyone. Today, our presenter is Shanae Ullman, who is a senior UX designer in corporate IT. During the past 12 years, she has built an engaging user experience for global corporate high-tech companies, academia, and small businesses. She has also taught classes in UX and UI at Northeastern University, Maryville University, and Fisher College. She has previously worked in UX and IT at a variety of software companies in the Boston area, including Red Hat, IBM, Kronos, the MathWorks, and Akamai. Her background is in user research, user experience design, WordPress design and development, and cloud applications. She has partnered with nonprofit organizations such as NSBE, GIQUE, and Big Sisters to increase awareness of design careers to underrepresented groups of girls and people of color. Her interests include scaling digital transformations for the enterprise, diversity and inclusion, and designing for mobile. Lastly, we ask that you put all your questions you have during Shanae's presentation in the chat, and Charlie, my fellow Boston volunteer, will hop on and read them during our Q&A session at the end. So without further ado, here's Shanae.
Right. Hi, everyone. Thank you for attending today, and thank you for that intro. So we'll get right into today's presentation. Today, I'm going to share with you about empowering teams that you work with, or even if you are a team of one, empowering your organization with effective onboarding, especially as it applies to user experience. So just to get started, a little bit about me. So I have a BA in communication, technology, and African American studies. And I started my career as a freelance web designer. So that's working with clients directly, small businesses, nonprofit organizations, and then moved to the Boston area and attended Northeastern University, did a master's in management of information systems, continued that consulting and freelance work on the side, and then began my career in enterprise IT at Red Hat. So throughout my career, changing jobs and positions, learning new systems, learning how to work with different types of people. Continued my career at IBM, Kronos, MathWorks, and Akamai. And again, seeing how onboarding was done at these different organizations, identifying what worked well for me and where I had issues and where there was some miscommunication. And I'm going to share some of those lessons learned with you here today. So I have also dabbled in being a professor as well at Fisher College and at Maryville University here in St. Louis, where I grew up and where I live now, and also at Northeastern University. Today, I am a senior UX designer at Boeing and also do consulting projects as part of my company, Nerdy Diva. So again, using this expertise from across these different companies and academic institutions to share with you today some really cool tips that you can take back and apply immediately to growing your UX onboarding experience. So often when we start new companies and new organizations, it's kind of like the house is on fire. We're trying to figure out what is up, what is down, how do these systems work, how do people communicate? And there's often a lot of challenges, and one, getting the work done that needs to get done, and then also figuring out your place in the system and who to turn to for help, etc. So in this time, onboarding is often pushed to the side, and the focus is on the real UX work. So a question for you to think about is, how do our UX teams succeed if they aren't being nurtured? If they aren't being given that onboarding support from day one? And I want to shift the culture so that we're focusing a bit more on design operations and design ops, and that is real UX work as well. That's part of making sure that we are productive, that we are able to commit to deliverables, that we are able to help our teams succeed. So a challenge for you. Think about your onboarding processes at your organization. If you have them, if you have thought about them, if you have them in place, if you're just getting started with them, and start writing down some ideas and think about getting feedback on your onboarding process from people who have joined your organization in the last 6 months or in the last 12 months. And feel free to email me at hello@nerdydiva for some more information following. So again, so a case study for me, I started a new organization, and this was an internal transfer for me. And at this new department, we also had new hires, so people who were new to the organization. Some of them, it was their first time working outside of being in college. They were recent college graduates. There were other internal transfers as well. Some people came from totally different departments. We had someone from finance who transitioned to user experience. So completely different skill set, and growing and learning how to do the job of a UX designer. Also work with teams in remote locations. I'm in the Midwest today, had teams on the East Coast, West Coast, Europe that we're collaborating with and working across these different time zones. And then again, like many of you, working on complex products, everyone on the team working on different pieces of the business, speaking different languages, and not really understanding how can we come together and support each other? How can we really be able to give each other the guidance that is needed in order to be successful? And there were also some things around the team culture. So this competitive attitude of wanting to beat someone else in terms of knowing more about user experience, or knowing the latest method versus someone else. So this idea of knowing more and superiority versus collaboration and sharing information in a way that makes people feel respected and makes people feel heard and makes people feel that they belong and are a part of that team. And with that, this idea that you have to be perfect as the UX designer. You have to know everything. You cannot make a mistake. You cannot have anything that is out of place. Over being vulnerable and saying, I don't know. I can find out. I think there's more research that needs to be done, and having a safe space in order to do that. And often deliverables that are due yesterday, and sometimes that happens because there's things that change in the market, or there's things that change from stakeholders' perspective, but often having this pressure of, we have so much work to do, we don't have time to focus on how do we nurture our team and how do we make sure that our team is supported. And in that way, actually leads to a lot of turnover. So a lot of people were leaving the team to other organizations within the company, or they were leaving the company altogether. So we had someone come to that team, and because they weren't getting the support, in my opinion, they found another opportunity outside of the company within 3 months. And as anyone who does hiring know, that that's really wasteful. So we spend a lot of time hiring and finding the right talent. We want to make sure that they stay and that they want to be in our organization over a long term. So ineffective onboarding strategy does pose a threat to team productivity, execution of UX deliverables, and talent retention. So this is something where, because it's so important for keeping the team intact and having them be successful on their products and on the services that they create with those agile development teams, it's important that we have the support and the community in place to help them and make sure that we have anything they need when they have questions, when they have concerns, when they just need to be able to identify who can they contact when they get stuck. So a question for you is, how do you nurture your UX teams? And how do you make sure that it's intentional, that it's not just we check in when someone starts the company and then you're off to your own devices? How do you check in on a continuous basis throughout the first week, the first month, first 3 months, the first year, and then over a long-term period? How do you check in to make sure that people feel like they are growing in their careers, that they are experiencing new challenges, new responsibilities, that they are feeling nurtured, and that they are feeling fed in your organization? All right, the fun part. So how do we talk about solutions? How do we talk about making this a more effective process with onboarding our teams? One, approach it how we approach products and services. Talk to real users. In this case, talk to people in your organization who have joined your company within the past 6 months, the past 12 months. Do some surveys and also take the time to do some interviews. So ask some questions of your new hires, people who came to your organization from external organizations, people who came to your department who are recent college graduates, and also getting that like internal transfer hire experience. So say the person who came to my group from finance, that is a completely different department, and getting information from that person on how was the transition? Do you feel prepared to start your role as a UX designer? What worked well? What didn't work well? How was it as you transition? Although you know the company, you don't possibly know how do we work with product managers and developers, and what would you have liked to see in order to feel more confident as you started working on your deliverables? And some simple questions for you to consider. As I mentioned, what worked well? What needs improvement? What questions do you still have at this point? How would you rate your first week and why? And also thinking about how do we incorporate diversity and equity and inclusion? Asking your new hires and your transfer hires, how are we as an organization doing on DEI? And why do you think this way? So if we are organizations that say we care about diversity, we care about inclusion, actually going to the source, going to our colleagues and our direct reports and asking them in a safe space, how are we really doing? How can we make this a more inclusive place where you feel like you belong and you have opportunities to succeed? So a takeaway here is to build onboarding with a human-centered design approach as we build products and solutions for our customers. Strive to alleviate pain, get feedback early and often, and increase discoverability and increase usability. So that's taking the approach of eating our own dog food, so to speak. So as we build out our products and services for customers, we also should apply that to how we grow our UX teams, that we are getting feedback, that we are hearing challenges, that we are hearing pain, and we're coming up with solutions based on what we're hearing for making sure that our team members feel supported and empowered, that they feel heard, and that they feel that they can be successful within our organizations. All right, so second challenge to think about, have you updated your onboarding process based on feedback from people who joined your team in the last 6 months or in the last year? And to dive in a little bit further into some of these onboarding solutions, I'm going to walk you through some things that has worked well for the teams that I have been a member of. One, we've created a team working agreement. Two, we have provided UX team support and resources, in particular for new hires, for recent college graduates, and for internal transfer hires. And three, we have become more intentional with remote collaboration. So because of COVID, most of us are remote, and we've been remote. We're probably going to stay remote definitely through the end of this year, many of us into next year, and some of us permanently. And before COVID, I was working remotely. I'm based here in St. Louis and was working with teams in Seattle and in Charleston, South Carolina, and in Chicago. And, it's just a part of working with enterprise colleagues and working with a global company that we have more opportunities to collaborate with our colleagues across the country and across the world. So how do we remote pair on design work? How do we utilize those design systems, have opportunities to share new ideas and trends? For my organization, we worked on what's called a designer think tank. So we would set time aside once a month, and we would go through ideas that people saw in the technology space, whether it's AI or IoT, and we would have space to just dive in and discuss what are some of the new technologies out there and hear about what's happening in the field of technology and user experience, and hear about what other people that we respect think is interesting and something that we should look into ourselves. Also, helping each other with understanding UX estimates and negotiation. So especially for teams who are working with product managers and developers, if it's the first time that they're having that experience, understanding what are some criteria for you when you think about deliverables. So usability testing or interviews or mock-ups or prototypes. What are some starting estimates that you can give to your team so that you are in alignment and are on the same page? And that can help with some of that collaboration and communication as well. All right, so creating a team working agreement. So this seems pretty basic, but it's really surprising how often, you know, common sense is not always common, right? So it's just identifying who's on the team, what are their roles and responsibilities so that everyone is in agreement, everyone understands. And then as a team coming together and identifying what do we value, how do we communicate, how do we gather, how do we share information, what hours do we work, when are our core hours, especially if we're across the US or in non-US locations, making sure we have some overlap, and how do we empower each other on the team. And this is something that can be updated when a new team member joins our team or when someone leaves our team. Often we have to transition and we have to adjust, and maybe we have to take on new responsibilities. And then also if there are restructurings that are happening to an organization. So if there's new management lines or if there's new divisions that are created, that could be another good time to update your team working agreement. So some sample ideas for your team working agreement. If on the left side, if you have a centralized UX team, definitely include the names, contact information. If you have portfolio links as well, include that of your UX leadership. That could be directors, managers, UX leads, senior UX designers, and also everyone on the team from designers, researchers, visual designers. If you have content writers, UX writers, also include them as well. And then on the right side, if you have decentralized UX teams, again, including names, contact information, portfolio links if you have them. And this can extend to your product owners, product managers, maybe development managers come to play in your organization directly for your design team, senior UX designers, and then again, designers and developers. So every organization is a little bit different. So identifying how your teams are structured and laying that out for someone who's new to your team to identify who's on this team and who are people that I can contact if anything comes up. Very important, something that also changes quite a bit. So as people move around and go into different roles or join or leave the company, making sure that that is updated as well. And we talk about team values. This is a sample of a team values deck that a team put together. So something that was of value for this team was punctuality for all team engagements, whether that's team meetings or stakeholder meetings. And if someone isn't able to make that meeting on time, sending out some communication ahead of time via a distribution list or something else. Also, respecting one another was something that was of value for this team. So this is supposed to be an activity that you do together in your UX team, and you're building consensus about how do we work together, how do we treat each other. So for this group, we don't blame one another, we value direct communication with the individual, and we value asking questions first before making assumptions or uninformed statements. We trust our team members to bring the best in their respective areas, and we believe people have good intentions. So this can help with level setting. Sometimes we may have different personalities on our teams, and level setting that we are all on the same team. We all have the same interests in being successful together, and that building and fostering that culture of collaboration and community on the team. And that ties into communication. So how do we communicate? When do we communicate? When do we gather? How do we share information? For this particular team, they built in core hours, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Central Time. And then you can alter that as it makes sense for your organization, just so that you have some overlap. If you have team members on East Coast, Central Time Zone, or on the West Coast, for example, making sure you have some core set hours that allow you to be online at the same time. And also think about how do you want to build relationships? So allowing team members to feel comfortable with getting in touch via calendars or emails when not during core hours, but they're not available during core hours. And valuing candor in conversations. So being aware of how you're saying things, not just what you say, but how you are saying it. And when it's possible, having face-to-face interactions, and that can be done via webcams. So now, because we're at home a lot of the times working, making sure that we have some opportunities to be on camera and see those facial expressions and connect that way is important and does make a difference. And I would also say just checking in with each other as well. So building relationships, asking people how they are outside of work. How was your weekend? What are you doing to stay busy and to stay motivated outside of work? Building in ways to communicate that allow you to find things that are similar. So if you have like an obsession about Halloween movies, for example, having some fun and taking some time to get to know the coworkers on your team. And that can be a way to feel more connection. And that can also lead to people being more comfortable opening up when there is conflict, when there are issues on the team as well. And similar to that is around empowerment. So thinking about how you as a team want to come together and strengthen each other. And this, again, is something they can do with your team members as a group. Consistent messaging is something that was important to this team, allowing the SME or the focal for each of the positions in the team to speak for those efforts and refer to that person as the lead for that activity, giving credit where credit is due, and celebrating small victories. So we often are just pushing along and just getting all the work done that we don't stop and celebrate. So if that's something that's important to your team and your culture, verbalizing that and also having it written out as part of your team working agreement can be helpful and can be a way to build that community and to build that sense of belonging and retention on your teams as well. Sharing knowledge, definitely a big way to share empowerment and learning and growing from everyone. And that's from someone who just graduated college to someone who is the director of user experience. We all can grow and learn from each other. And having a culture that celebrates learning and growing from each other is something that can also help with communication and involvement, engagement, empowerment of your team members. All right, so another thing that has been successful for the teams that I've worked with is providing support and resources. So for someone who is new to the organization, whether that is a new hire or a transfer hire, having an assigned buddy or focal that will be the go-to person for the first couple of weeks or the first couple of months, and checking in consistently. So during the first week, checking in, making sure that that person has everything that they need. Again, with the first month and the third month. So being intentional and being able to be a listening ear, and also being someone who can help when that person gets stuck and maybe doesn't know what questions to ask. So sharing information that is helpful, sharing when there's particular initiatives or resources that need to be accessed as well. You can also consider creating checklists and having some type of incentive for completion. So having some swag if they complete these the completion of the checklist. And this can be a way to help people learn more about the company, the team's operating rhythm, and also information about UX methods and tools if they are newer to the UX industry. So now I want to show you a few samples of some support and resources that have been helpful in my organization for people who are new to the UX team, people who are brand new to user experience, and also people who are new to the company. So for people who are new to the UX team, that usually is people who are internal transfer hires, so they're from different departments within the company, or they are new hires to the organization. And there's information in this template around being proactive in your career, and also just how to obtain the appropriate software, so like Sketch and Envision, Axure, Miro, how to obtain that software within the company, information around team meetings and logistics on when do we gather, how do we communicate, and when to post information around updates that you may have around your projects. All right, and here are some resources for people who are new to user experience as a UX researcher or UX designer or visual designer. Again, some information about being proactive in your career, performing informational interviews internally, so asking people to share more about their careers and their current roles, doing some job shadowing, and you can do that virtually as well. So asking a team member if you can observe them in a meeting or going through a method that you have some interest in. Asking questions and the various channels that you may have, whether that's Slack or any other tools, IM that you have within your organization, and just having a mentality of staying curious and asking questions, sharing what you learn, and being proactive and networking with other people in your organization and outside your organization about user experience. Also, here are some information about design patterns. So material design patterns, Apple design patterns, Microsoft design patterns to be used as resources, different Sketch UI kits, different ways to obtain open source icons. We have some material design icons, the Noun project icons, and Font Awesome icons, and also professional organizations to consider joining. So definitely UXPA and also others like AIGA, IXDA, etc., and design communities that help people who are new to user experience learn more about the industry, learn from other people who have gone down this path, and just gather a slew of information to help them feel more confident and help them to address any questions that they may have about the industry. And that way it helps them, stay involved and engaged in user experience and helps them grow their skill set. And that leads to more productivity and more development of our products and services as well. All right, and then finally, sample of a new to the company checklist. So having this information for someone who is new to the company, came to the company from an external organization, or came from college, or is part of an internship. And you can have some information here about common FAQs that people new to the company have, and put into a checklist format to make it more interactive. So in it, have some information that they can find about your company and your sector and your competitors, and some information about some of those practical logistics, like how do you set up like encryption for your email at your company? How do you access your VPN, content? How do you access some of your servers? Things that you have to do for certain items within your company. Have them practice some of that stuff first before they have to be thrown into a project where they need to do it immediately, and time is of the essence. So again, giving them encouragement that they can be proactive in their career. For some people, they need to be given the green light to ask questions. So making sure that you create the safe space that it's okay to ask questions, it's okay to be curious, it's okay to be proactive and find people who are doing interesting things in your organization and reach out to them and ask them questions and meet up with them. Again, incentivize the completion in some way. So some companies have points that they give out, and they have a store, and you can purchase things within the store because you have points that will equal $1. So for every point that you have, it equals $1, and you can buy something small for yourself. So that could be one way to incentivize, or you can have like gift cards, or you could do something small to make it more of like a fun reward for completing this this checklist. So again, making sure that it's a process where there's a lot of information for someone who is joining a team and joining an organization. So trying to make it more interactive, trying to make it more fun for them, and definitely being sure to remind them that they are supported and that they are not on their own, and that they are part of this team and have resources for themselves. All right, so last challenge for you all. Think about, have you updated your onboarding process for your remote teams in the last 6 months? So many of us are working remotely now. So thinking about, how do we change onboarding now that we have more remote teams and more remote teammates? Is there anything that needs to change, or is everything perfectly fine? There's something for you to think about as you continue on with your day. And lastly, thinking about being intentional with remote collaboration. So remote team building, using the tools of design systems, and remote pairing. So some of the things that we found successful is just setting up virtual coffee dates, setting up 30 minutes and just, just talking, catching up, asking how people are doing, especially during COVID. How is your quarantine going? Have you been baking more? Have you been cooking more? Have you been working out? Just having some of that like human to human interaction, building up that relationship. Using tools like Fun Retro. So many of us have retrospectives, but Fun Retro is another way that we can have a more interactive, real-time collaborative retro together, no matter what location that we're in. Similar to Miro and Mural, using these tools for design thinking workshops can bring in some of that fun and the interactivity as well and keep people engaged. And also consider having a way to allow people to share their work in a project showcase, or we call it designer think tank in my organization, where we would go through and share information from industry, whether that's new products in IoT or any of the new trends that we see in the tech space, and have some discussion about how could we possibly utilize that in our organization. And always just being open to share what we know and asking questions, and let that extend to hobbies and interests, and really building relationships with our coworkers. And also thinking about leveraging design systems, walk through, actually take the time, set time aside to walk through design systems that you have for your organization. Build from those reusable components. Take what's already there as a way to maintain consistency, and think about how can we create reusable components as well, and how can we add new elements to our design systems. I always say keep your outtakes, because you never know when those outtakes could make it back into the final round. So keeping that information available and sharing that with team members as well, for something that they could possibly benefit from, can be valuable. And definitely documenting your design decisions, whether that's making comments, whether that's having some presentation, or whether that's just having a wiki with information about why you made those design decisions, having that available so that it's clear for someone who picks up your designs after you, can understand why these decisions were made and build on top of that. And then for remote pairing, some tips that have been helpful is assigning a lead and then assigning a follow. And maybe you switch that up depending on what you're working on. If someone is stronger in visual design, maybe that person is the lead for the day. If someone else is stronger in research, maybe that person is the lead for the day. And you decide that based on what the needs of your project are, and create a UX plan together with some of those estimates for how long you think it will take you to get some of those deliverables completed, and sharing that out with your PMs and with your development teams as well. And you can decide if you want to divide and conquer your work, or if you want to pair in real time, screen sharing, using Sketch and Envision, or any other tools that you're using for mockups and prototypes. And that's something where you're having communication, you're having collaboration, and you can do what works best for your pair, and just have some experimentation and some trial and error in that space. Have found that collaboration and team building occurs when you're checking in consistently. So again, having check-ins once or twice a week, or once a month, or every third month, whatever works for your organization. And that takes some time and finding the right cadence as well. So don't be afraid to experiment and try out what cadence feels good for your pairing and for your organization. And again, leveraging those design systems and tools, keep track of your edits and your versions. So if you're in a pair, having your initials around your edits and your versions, and updating that to a visible location, whether that's SharePoint, whether that's Confluence, whatever the tool is that you use. Maybe it's a file share on a server, but put it in a visible location so that your pair can find it, and so that other people in your organization can find it as well. And in summary, some tips for you all. Definitely create a team working agreement, provide UX team support and resources for your new hires, your recent college grads, and your internal transfer hires, and be intentional with remote collaboration via remote pairing, leveraging design systems, creating space for showing projects and new trends in UX, like a design think tank, and communicating UX estimates and negotiating. And that is all I have for you. Thank you for your time. And if you are interested in some UX onboarding templates, send me an email, and I will share with you some of the templates that you've seen here today.
Well, thank you, Shanae. I'm super excited to check out some of those resources you had at the end there. There was like an encyclopedia of different resources toward the end there. It was awesome.
Yeah.
And so we did have a couple of questions come in while you were giving your talk, but we do have about 6 minutes left at this point. So first question comes in from Kevin. He says, often design ops has been co-opted to include things like design systems. How have you seen folks who are more interested in the culture side work within design ops to focus on that while not being focused on the design system?
Oh, that's a good question. Wow. So I think that it's really a matter of being strategic and being a tactician. So like the culture piece is around more of the strategy and how do we as an organization collaborate and communicate. But it is important that on a practical level that we have systems in place, that we have design systems, that we have processes for people to create reusable components and bring them back into the design system. So it's a very thin line between being the strategic person and the tactician in the design ops world, because you need both of them to be successful.
Awesome. All right, so the next question comes in from Chelsea. She says, in a large organization, where does the ownership lie in terms of establishing and evaluating the designer onboarding experience? Do you see this as a specialization amongst the design ops team, an organizational or a cultural design, or a function of human resources?
That's a good question, and I'm jealous for the companies that have a dedicated design ops organization. I have never been at a company where we just got to do design ops. So usually it's UX designers seeing a gap. So that's what I did. I saw gaps. I was the most senior person on my most recent team, and there are a lot of people who came over from college programs. We had interns. We had people who came from completely different parts of the organization, and like we need ways to help people get ramped up. And especially when you're at large organizations, they run slowly. So if you have opportunities to help influence your teams, take advantage of that and start today. Start experimenting today. How can we create a better onboarding experience for the people in our little world on our little UX teams?
Oh, that's excellent. So the next question comes in from Miwako, and she says, have you seen any onboarding platforms in the market that help deliver exceptional onboarding experiences, especially in these remote times?
Yeah, I have been looking out for some onboarding platforms that have been created by HR tech companies like Bamboo. HR has some really interesting onboarding platforms. I think Bonfire is another one that has employee engagement and onboarding as well. The challenge is, though, in many organizations, although there's a need for onboarding, there often isn't an additional budget for getting onboarding software. So sometimes we have to work with the tools that we have in-house. And I think it's really important to see what's out there in industry and identify, yeah, if we have the budget to purchase these tools, let's do some pros and cons lists for the different tools that exist. If we don't have the budget to purchase those tools, is there elements of the tool that we can create for ourselves in-house? How do we do an MVP in-house that would help us get the results that we need?
I like that solution. All right, and the last question that we have comes from Sheba, and she says, if you're already in UX at a company, how can you advocate for a more structured onboarding and also participate in it for your professional development?
Very good question. And again, I think it's around when you see a gap, definitely bringing it up and also bringing up ideas for solutions. So thinking about what would be helpful for you, what would you like to see, doing some of that analysis, asking other people in your organization, how can we make this better? And coming up with a plan, putting a plan together. If there's small things that you can do in your organization to make an impact doing that. Sometimes, so I'm in the camp of ask for forgiveness instead of permission. So that is in the camp that I'm in. And I would encourage you to definitely think about creating some ideas that you can then present to management and leadership and say, hey, we've thought of this. Is this something that we can invest in? Is this something that we can grow? So I was on a team where I reported into a developer manager, and he didn't really know about user experience. So I was the one who put together onboarding resources because I knew our team needed it. He did not think of it, but when he saw it, he thought, oh, that's great. Of course we should have that. We should definitely use that. So sometimes being proactive and putting those materials in place is how we can also be the change in our organizations as well.
Oh, that's awesome. All right, so I think that's all the time that we have. So thank you so much for your session today. Everyone, the next session is going to begin at 3:30. And please, please, please remember to fill out the session survey with your feedback for Shanae, because she'll be excited to have that.
I will be. Thank you all. Take care. Bye-bye.